Hi, this is Zach with worn&wound. Today I'll be taking a look at the Bulova Precisionist Champlain Chronograph. This is a pretty wild looking watch from Bulova, who, as you probably know, are a very famous brand. They're one of the original American watch manufacturers. They are now owned by Citizen of Japan, and their line is very strange, kind of curious mix of watches, and they have in it this Precisionist line that I feel like is a very interesting watch that goes kind of unnoticed. And what makes it interesting is the Precisionist movement. It's a quartz movement that, as you can see, has a sweep seconds hand, which is, characteristically quartz watches have a sharp ticking seconds hand. So this has a sweep seconds hand, and it's accurate to within 10 seconds in a year, which is just wildly more accurate than a mechanical watch. Even a chronometer grade watch is +4, -6 seconds a day. So this is much, much, much more accurate than that. And then this watch itself is also a chronograph. This is a recent addition to their line, and it has a pretty wild chronograph that's accurate to 1/1000th of a second. We'll show you that works later. And then this watch is, as you can see, it's pretty over the top. It's not the kind of typical style that we talk about, but has a lot going on. I kind of just really wanted to see what they would do with a watch. So this one comes in, the MSRP on it's $800. You can probably find it for a little bit less, which is quite expensive for a quartz watch, but like I said, this is a pretty special quartz. And it has just a very aggressive, sporty design, a real kind of collision of materials, creating a flashy watch, a pretty dynamic looking watch, but also kind of a very interesting one. So let's take a closer look now. The case of the Bulova Precisionist chronograph is really massive. It's 46.5 millimeters wide, though to the crown it's almost 50 millimeters. Lug to lug, it's 54.6 millimeters, and then it's 17.9 millimeters tall, which I think makes it one of the tallest watches we've ever actually reviewed, which makes you kind of forget the fact that it is a quartz movement rather than a mechanical, because usually these can be thinner and lighter. This watch is also exceptionally heavy at around 260 grams. The case design is bold and chunky and very, I'd say architectural, but almost architectural in the sense of like a fort or a palace. I mean, this thing has got columns on it and like big, chunky buttresses and things like that. I mean, it's a really wild and unique design. I mean, I have to give them credit for coming up with something very different. Looking at it now, so you have this big bezel. It's a fixed bezel that has these 4 kind of hex screw columns in there, and those, are preventing it from moving. I don't know if they're aesthetic or if they're actually holding anything together. They're probably just aesthetic, but they, add a very strong detail that kind of makes me think of, some luxury sport watches like Bulova or APs and things like that. Then the case itself has this, it's kind of slab-sided, but it has cutaways into it, making it very kind of strange and a little bit of a different design. And, there's something going on at every moment of this watch, so I actually quite like that element of it, even if it is a little bit kind of over the top. The lugs, then you can see, are very geometrical. They're faceted in interesting ways. But perhaps the most interesting thing about the case design is actually the curved crystal. As you can see, maybe that's this more interesting side with the crown guards here. The bezel here, which also has a knurled pattern on it, has this very elegant curve to it, and the crystal follows that. So as you're looking at it and you're kind of moving around, you can see the dial kind of distort. It's just an interesting detail. We're used to seeing flat crystals or domed crystals, but this is just a curved crystal. So it's just a cool detail. I think it adds a little bit of interest to the design itself. Looking here on the right side, you have the 2 chrono pushers here, and this crown is a screw-down crown with kind of a twisting knurled pattern on it. It's pretty nice. It's easy to grasp. I actually like how it integrates with the crown guards. It's pretty smooth into there. And then over here at 8 o'clock, you have another crown, and that actually is used to convert the watch from time mode to chronograph mode, which we'll show you when we talk more about the movement. The dial of the Bulova Precisionist chronograph is pretty over the top. They really kind of went for it and maximized, I think, just about what they could do. There's a lot of depth to it, a lot of texture, and a lot of kind of contrasting, but not necessarily in a bad way, but kind of contrasting materials. So looking at the surface there's kind of like, there's many different layers, kind of steps to it, but the very, very back surface has a carbon fiber look to it that, I don't know if it's actual carbon fiber, but it actually, it has a kind of interesting glimmer to it. giving already kind of an immediate texture. And then on top of that, you have these 4 subdials here, which relate to the chronograph function. At 12, you have stacked on top of each other the 10th of a second and 100th second registers. At 3, you have hours. At 6, you have a 1,000th second register, and then you have a 60-minute register at 9. So there's a lot going on there, a lot of detail. And I think they did a good job of distinguishing everything from each other. You know, I think the spacing and the proportioning of the various subdials is quite nice. I like that the 100th and 10th seconds and the 1,000th have these silver rings around them, giving it a bit of kind of a vertical balance there. You know, I think they did a good job of keeping the symmetry despite having so much going on. Then around that, there's a slight, I don't know if you can see this quite so well, but there's a blue ring that is textured and has a nice metallic finish to it, and that kind of separates this inner area from then this outer index, which is your primary hour index. And that consists of applied steel markers, each with a little loomed strip on top of a silver perlage plate. So there you have another texture that kind of contrasts with the carbon fiber texture. You know, it's very interesting looking, a lot to look at, kind of ostentatious, but you know, I do like that there's something very industrial, kind of very racing inspired about it all. And then taking a step up, you have this chapter ring here, which has a tachometer, once again relating to the chronograph. Then the hands of the watch, you have these, you know, the hour and minute hand, these large kind of skeletonized fence post hands with a loom at the very tip. I think they actually suit the watch design quite nicely. And then on each of the sub-registers, you have either white or yellow kind of triangular pointed hands. And then, of course, the second hand here in yellow with this sort of Precisionist logo, which is a sort of an infinity ampersand looking design. Yeah, then the only other detail is that here between 4 and 5, you have a date window showing the large black numeral on a white disc. The real star of the Bulova Precisionist chronograph is the quartz movement inside. So there's various kind of interesting things about this movement. The most visually apparent is the sweep seconds hand. Typically quartz watches have, you know, second hands that tick very sharply, whereas mechanical sweep. But in this case, this movement actually sweeps. And that is a result of the fact that this watch has a frequency that's 8 times greater than a typical quartz watch. So, you know, it's actually vibrating really, really quickly, thus giving you the smooth sweeping seconds. The other result of that is that it is accurate to within 10 seconds in a year, which is extremely, extremely accurate. Probably the only thing that's more accurate than that are watches that are radio controlled, but a mechanical watch is going to be far less accurate than 10 seconds a year. I mean, they're going to lose seconds within a day. The other interesting thing is that this has a convertible into a 1/1000th chronograph, which I'll show you now. You push this button here at 8, and the sweep seconds will then speed up and go back to 0-60. Unfortunately, you have to wait for that every time, but you know, it doesn't have a snap back function. So you start the movement then with the chrono pusher at 2, and you'll see now the second hand ticks, though it's a very measured tick that kind of smoothly sweeps and then stops. And then here at the sub-register below 12, you have the 1/10th second and 1/100th seconds hands spinning very, very quickly. Unfortunately, these stop at the 30-second mark, and I don't know if that is to save battery or what, but afterwards you just have the second hand ticking. Then internally, see there, it just stopped. Internally, it is also recording the 1/1000th of a second. So now I'm going to stop the watch, and you'll see that those various hands move now to read to those decimal places. You then reset it, typically with the 4 o'clock pusher, and it slowly kind of sweeps back. But it is very cool to have that 1/1000th you know, interval, being able to measure that. Granted, that's probably a lot faster than your fingers can move, but you know, it just speaks to kind of the level of precision of this movement. The Bulova Precisionist chronograph is really, really large. You know, I think it's actually a bit too large for my 7-inch wrist. And that's not just the 46 millimeter diameter here. It's actually the distance here from end link to end link. So the case itself is about 54 from lug to lug, but with the end links on here, it's 62 millimeters from end to end. And that does kind of travel fully over my wrist. So I think for me, it is too big. But, for a larger wrist, I do think that this is a definitely a wearable watch with a very kind of interesting, I'd say automotive-inspired design. You have these, use of the carbon fiber in there, blue and yellow, which definitely bring about kind of to me, a idea of race cars, sport cars, racing, things like that, and then the sheer size of it and industrial look of it just makes me think about that all the more. It has great presence, as you can see. It is very bold. It's a bit in your face and kind of out there. The mix of textures on the dial, they all pick up light in interesting ways, so it kind of glimmers, but it's still very, very, very masculine and quite sporty. The watch comes on this steel bracelet here, which actually is a very nice design. It's a unique design. It's very faceted with interesting kind of geometry to it. So you have these links that they look like 3 links, but it's 2 links, a part on the side, and then a centerpiece that kind of raises up a little bit and has a facet on it. It's a really nice mix of finishing on it, actually. So you've brushed going here, and then you have a line of polish, and then actually there's this little divot in here which has like a little bit of matte. So it's actually a very interesting looking bracelet that goes very well with the case design. Obviously they have this rather extreme end link design to really integrate it into there. It's also just very solid, very, very heavy, adding to the 260 gram weight of the watch. And you have a double securing clasp here with a little Bulova logo. So you can flip that up and then you open the clasp like that. And it does also have a dive extension on it as well, should you need that, though I don't really see this as a real diver watch. To wrap up, the Bulova Precisionist Chronograph has some very interesting details to it, the most interesting being the precisionist movement itself. Not only does it a quartz movement with a sweep seconds hand, but has a 1/1000th second chronograph, which is quite exceptional, and an accuracy of within 10 seconds a year, which is just kind of unparalleled. For $800, it is very expensive for a quartz watch, but clearly it has special features to it which distinguish it from a normal quartz movement. So if you're going to pay anything more than a couple $100 for a quartz watch, I really think it has to have exceptional characteristics, which this one does. And frankly, the watch itself, though too big for me and perhaps a little too garish, is well made. It's nicely detailed. It has very, very, very solid construction. The bracelet's quite beautiful, and the curved crystal is a really nice detail. So I think it has the build quality to support the watch. It's never going to fall apart on you, and so on and so forth. I would love to see them do a smaller watch. I mean, the 46.5 millimeters is huge. Way too big for me, and I would like to see something with a little bit more of a perhaps classic chronograph design, maybe a little bit more vintage inspired, just to make it a little bit more typical and a little bit more wearable. But if this appeals to you, I think that it's a very cool watch with a lot going on and a lot to look at and kind of play with. So please read the full review on Worn and Wound. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Tumblr. Thank you.